My name is Dr. Maria Vasquez. I'm 34 years old and I work as a clinical researcher for one of the 5 highest-rated medical colleges in the country. And one horrible morning about 5 years ago, while I was doing my residency at a leading medical research center, I awake to what appeared to be a rash around my mouth. Well, I feel stupid saying this now, but at the time I thought I was having some sort of allergic reaction or breakout or something. And while I did feel a little self-conscious when I noticed it, I headed into the medical lab like usual, thinking it wasn't too big of a deal. Almost from the second I walked through the door, however, the embarrassment started. Everyone was staring at me. I caught 2 girls who worked in the lab with me, who I thought were my friends, pointing and giggling from across the room. And suddenly, I was humiliated as Mark, the young MD I'd had a crush on for more than 6 months, walked up to me and asked me point break, "What's going on around your mouth? It kind of looks like, it kind of looks like herpes." I wanted to cry when Mark said this, but only because I thought he was being stupid. How could I have gotten herpes? I'd only been all the way with a small handful of guys in my entire life, and in almost every single instance, that was when we were in a committed long-term relationship. So I forced myself to laugh in Mark's face, and to tell him that it was a funny joke, but that no, it was just an outbreak, that my skin was probably just reacting to something I ate. But while I was laughing on the outside, my mind started to race on the inside. Wait a second. There was Joseph, the last guy I'd been with. We dated for about 2 months before I'd let him go all the way with me, and as soon as we did, he stopped returning my phone calls or replying to my texts. Finally, after my 15th message, he did text back saying he wasn't ready for a relationship and that it was better if we didn't see each other anymore. I thought at the time that Joseph was just an asshole. But what if there was more to it than that? What if he was infected and had stopped talking to me because he didn't want me to know it was from him? What if he'd used me and left me to be damaged goods for life? As soon as my shift was finished, I ran across campus to visit my former professor, Dr. Richard Reagan. Now, I have to give you the quick background on Dr. Reagan. He's an expert in human pathology. He's had more than 170 academic papers published on viruses and diseases, ranging from HIV to pancreatic cancer. He's widely considered to be the biggest authority on sexually transmitted diseases in the country. And fortunately for me, at the time, his clinical lab was about a 10-minute walk from my own. As I entered Dr. Reagan's lab, I was again struck by that feeling of incredible embarrassment. This man had not just been my professor, but also a mentor, and I wanted to run away from him as fast as possible, rather than experience the shame of telling him that I thought I had an STD. But I had to know, and so I walked up to the professor, pointed to my mouth, and told him that I was afraid. Thankfully, Dr. Reagan didn't judge me or glare at me. Instead, he just listened sympathetically and told me that he could take a cell culture and that we could look at it together. I waited anxiously with my stomach in knots as the doctor looked through the microscope at the cell sample he'd taken. And then I felt my heart burst through my chest and drop to the floor as he told me the most terrible news I'd ever heard. "Maria," he said, "I don't know how to tell you this, and I wish I didn't have to, but these tests are positive. Not just for HSV-1, but for HSV-2 also. I'll run a blood analysis for you too, but I'm 99% sure the results will be the same. I'm really sorry." I threw up. Literally, I grabbed the wastebasket that was next to the lab table and hurled into it for about 2 minutes straight, while at the same time feeling the hot tears streaming down my face. All I could think of was what this meant, having both oral and genital herpes. I mean, I hadn't noticed any outbreak down there, but I'd been so busy with my medical residency, I barely had time to sleep, let alone monitor my body. But if what Dr. Reagan was saying was true, and I really did have both type 1 and type 2 herpes, my life was ruined. I would never meet the man of my dreams and have him fall in love with me. Even if I did find Mr. Perfect, and he did like me, it could never be. The second I had to tell him, "Sorry, Mr. Perfect, but I have not just 1, but 2 types of herpes," it would be over. It doesn't matter if you are the most beautiful woman in the world. The moment a guy knows you have herpes, he sees you as some kind of skank. And I'd never do that. I'd never tell him, or any other guy who wanted to start dating me, that I had genital and oral herpes, which meant I was going to be lonely for the rest of my life. And that's not to mention the embarrassment of outbreaks. I'd have to spend every single day in constant fear of another outbreak, of having to lie to friends, families, and coworkers every time those scabbing sores started appearing around my lips and mouth, or feel the secret and dirty shame of knowing I'd had an outbreak down there. People would look at me and think I was a slut, even though I'd only been with a few men and had always used protection and had never had a one-night stand in my life. My life was over, and I would be damaged goods until the day I died. I left Dr. Reagan's office with a prescription for Valtrex in hand and headed directly to the pharmacy. Then I went straight to my apartment, got into bed, and didn't leave it for 7 days. When the outbreak finally did go away and I finally did return to work, I felt like everything was different, even though my sores were gone and there was no sign of my herpes anywhere. It still felt like people knew. And when Mark and I were forced to work together, I felt like I couldn't even make eye contact with him anymore. Because while in the past I'd imagined us eventually dating or being together long term, that was no longer a possibility. Well, the months continued to pass and I didn't have another outbreak, but the medication was starting to take its toll on me. The Valtrex made me feel constantly nauseated, like I was going to puke. So I switched to acyclovir, but that was even worse as I quickly started noticing that my hair was falling out in clumps. I researched Famvir, but found out it caused dizziness, drowsiness, and even kidney problems. And on top of all this, there was still the obvious but deeply frustrating fact that none of these medications actually cured the herpes virus. They simply masked the symptoms while making you sick. So once again, I paid a visit to Dr. Reagan's office. I hadn't spoken with him since he'd called me to tell me that the blood test matched the cell culture, and it felt extremely embarrassing for me to go see him face to face again, as he was not only my professor, but also one of the few people in the world who knew my shameful secret. But despite that shame, I was desperate to know if there were any medications I could try that weren't plagued with side effects. Or better still, if he or anyone else in the country were any closer to finding a cure for the herpes virus. And so I walked through the door to his lab yet again, put on my best smile, and asked him to share the most recent research on the herpes simplex virus with me, to tell me anything at all that might suggest there was hope. Well, asking a man who has spent his entire life researching viruses to tell you about how one of them works is a lot like asking a gym rat to tell you about working out. Their eyes light up and they'll talk for hours. That was exactly the case with Dr. Reagan. But instead of being bored by what he had to say, I was absolutely fascinated. He had a way of explaining how the herpes virus works and why it's so hard to destroy that I've never heard of before, even in medical school. And though I didn't know it yet, what Dr. Reagan was telling me would ultimately be the key to permanently deleting the herpes virus from my body, while helping 27,442 other women and men do the exact same thing. Here's how Dr. Reagan explained it to me. Your herpes outbreaks are basically warning signs. They're trying to tell you that your immune system has been compromised. Those warning signs are important because, as you probably already know, it's easy for your herpes to stay hidden for long periods of time, which means if you don't have an initial outbreak, you would never know you had the virus. In a lot of ways, having a herpes outbreak is similar to having a fever. Normally, a fever occurs because you've been infected by some sort of common virus, and your body raises its internal temperature, both to warn you that you've been infected and to aid your immune system in fighting off the infected cells. Herpes is different from a common infection, however, meaning that even though your immune system is compromised, your body isn't naturally equipped to fight it. That's because once you've been infected with herpes, the virus burrows itself deep into your body and hides, just like a dirty rat will hide behind the walls of your home. Now, without getting too technical on you, let me quickly explain the science behind how the virus is able to hide from your immune system. The way it works is that herpes simplex encodes a protein called ICP32, or infected cell protein 32, in the body. This evil protein cloaks herpes from the immune system, which is what stops the immune system from being able to destroy it. That's also the reason why none of the herpes medications on the market are able to eliminate your herpes. All they can do is stop the virus from growing inside your body, but they can't destroy it because they don't even know where it's hiding. So in other words, using those medications to fight herpes is a lot like trying to use your fists to fight a ghost. It's physically impossible. Well, at first, hearing all of this from Dr. Reagan, it made me feel hopeless, just like it might make you feel hopeless right now. But as I sat there thinking about what he just said, I had an idea. Something that sounded incredibly simple, but that would eventually lead to a major medical breakthrough. Basically, my idea was this. If the reason the medications can't destroy your herpes is because the virus is cloaked in your cells and hides from the immune system, couldn't you theoretically do something to unhide it and thereby allow your immune system to quickly target and destroy it? When I asked Dr. Reagan about this, he seemed surprised. He said that as unbelievable as it might sound, no one had ever asked him that question before, and that while it was theoretically possible, pretty much all academic research and all of the pharmaceutical companies had simply focused on suppressing the virus, not destroying it. That was completely unacceptable to me, and it made me mad. Why the hell was nobody pursuing this? Why the hell was no one looking for a cure? I mean, I'm smart, but I'm not a genius. Surely I wasn't the first person to think of this. So what gave? Well, I expressed these feelings to Dr. Reagan, albeit a little more gently, and he couldn't really give me a good answer, which is why I submitted a transfer request that very same day. And 2 weeks later, I found myself assigned to work in Dr. Reagan's human pathology lab full-time. It felt sort of funny laying down the law to this man, who was one of the most respected experts on human disease and viruses in the world. But this was personal. It was about not having to feel like a victim for the rest of my life, or having to suffer from the humiliation of another outbreak. It was about taking back my freedom, the freedom to live life as I chose, to find the man of my dreams and have a loving relationship with him, without suffering from the fear of being rejected once he knew my secret. I more or less forced one of the most respected researchers and academics in the world to join me in this mission. I told him to think of the accolades, the awards, the fame that would result in him curing genital and oral herpes, two of the ugliest, most hated medical afflictions in the world, and fortunately, he agreed. So for the next 3 months, we spent 16 hours per day in his lab. We studied what seemed to stimulate the virus and what seemed to cause it to go dormant. We rigorously tested hundreds of different ways to uncloak the virus, searching for a way to unbind the ICP32 from the cells so that it was no longer hidden from the immune system. And on the 94th day of testing, we finally made our first breakthrough. We discovered that there was a certain combination of organic chemical compounds that seemed to act as a hyperstimulator. In other words, by adding these compounds to the body in a very specific dosage and span of time, we could separate the ICP32 proteins from the nerve cells, thus allowing the immune system to attack them. It was a huge accomplishment, and that night I hardly slept at all because I was so filled with hope. But over the next 2 weeks of additional testing, it quickly became clear that the battle was still only half won. That's because even though we were able to expose the infected cell protein to the immune system, and the immune system did attack it, the virus remained too strong and the immune system failed to eliminate it. We could have given up, but I'd come way too far, and I was too close to getting my life back, and potentially helping millions of women and men across the country to do the same thing. So instead of quitting, we began to look at ways to put the immune system into overdrive. The reason for this was that if the problem was that the immune system wasn't strong enough to destroy the virus, we just had to change all of that by making the immune system even stronger. And so Dr. Reagan and I went to work formulating a unique vitamin and supplement regimen that, when taken in the right amounts over the right period of time, would give the immune system the boost that it needed to win the fight against HSV1 and HSV2. We tested more than 130 different formulas with limited results until finally, on May 16, 2014, we finally discovered a unique combination of vitamins, minerals, and supplements that, when taken properly, turned the immune system into an invincible war machine that was so powerful and so strong, it could destroy the herpes virus for good. And that very day we got back the test results and saw that the virus had been destroyed in our lab samples. I became a human guinea pig and tried this herpes elimination system on myself. Honestly, following this scientifically designed program was so easy, it felt hard to believe it had taken us 5 months to create it, or that no one else on the planet had figured it out before us. Every vitamin and supplement required to both draw the virus out and to make the immune system so strong that it could destroy it once exposed could be found at my local grocery store, and combined costs less than $100 to procure. I followed the daily schedule we'd created, taking the right dosages and combinations of these different natural supplements and vitamins, which contained the organic chemical compounds required to trigger intense reactions inside my body, but that were still natural, gentle, and safe, while taking new blood samples every single day. And finally, on June 21st, 2014, almost 3 weeks exactly from when I began following the treatment protocol we'd established, I was overwhelmed with joy, with relief, with incredible gratitude when my blood analysis for both HSV1 and HSV2 came back 100% negative. Imagine waking up in 21 days from now and knowing you will never have to worry about the herpes virus again, or to even think about it. Imagine getting your life back, or being able to date whoever you want, or never lying in bed sick to your stomach because you have sores on and around your lips and have to go to work. Imagine never hearing people whisper and laugh behind your back, or feel heartbroken when a guy calls you a skunk or a slut, even though it's completely untrue. Imagine never experiencing the burning, the itching, or the physical discomfort that comes from an outbreak. And imagine being free from the expensive, side effect-filled medications, things that make your hair fall out, that make you sick to your stomach, that are poisoning your kidneys. It is the greatest feeling in the world. Something that I want every single person, all 20% of Americans who are currently suffering from herpes, and all 10% of the Americans who suffer from both HSV1 and HSV2 to experience for themselves. That's why over the next 6 months, Dr. Reagan and I ran clinical trials of our natural, completely side effect-free herpes treatment. And out of the 329 test subjects, people who had either herpes type 1, herpes type 2, or even some combination of both, and who had been infected for anywhere from 3 months to 30 years, every single one of them was able to eliminate all traces of the herpes virus from their body in less than 21 days. It was truly a miracle. And as Dr. Reagan and I recorded our findings and put them into an academic paper to be published in the leading medical journals in the world, we were dead certain that we were about to become famous beyond our wildest dreams. After all, we had figured out a way to completely destroy one of the most common and despised viral infections ever known to man. And we couldn't wait to get our findings out there to the world. Well, boy, were we in for a rude awakening. We submitted our findings to more than 15 of the country's leading medical journals, and every single time the response was the same. This is incredible, absolutely amazing, but we simply can't publish it. At first, it made no sense. Why would these leading academics in the fields of science and medicine purposely censor this information from getting into the hands of honest, deserving victims? But after having multiple private conversations with his peers and colleagues, including some of those responsible for publishing these journals, Dr. Reagan came to me with some extremely disappointing news. The reason all of these leading researchers and doctors wouldn't publish our findings, he said, was that they were absolutely terrified of being blackballed by the pharmaceutical industry. You see, it turns out that Big Pharma is the single largest funder of medical research in the United States. If you don't believe me, just look at who the 5 largest funders of the American Herpes Foundation are. GlaxoSmithKline, Roche Pharmaceuticals, BioVale Pharmaceuticals Inc., Novartis Pharmaceuticals, and Reliant Pharmaceuticals. These massive international conglomerates, who consider herpes their $60 billion a year cash cow, have absolutely zero interest in finding a cure for herpes, or really any other diseases for that matter. And because they control the gold, they also get to make all of the rules, which includes choosing what medical research gets published and what medical research gets suppressed from ever reaching the public. Well, when I heard this, It made me want to punch a wall. Who the hell were these corporations to keep something so incredibly important, so vital, from you? How could they control medicine and science like this, even at the expense of giving you your life back? It was depressing, but even more so, it was infuriating, which is why I decided to say screw the corporations and their lapdogs in academic medicine and put our research and findings online for everyone to see. So for the next 2 months, Dr. Reagan and I worked around the clock to take our natural treatment program and break it down into a simple, easy-to-follow guide. We've called it the Herpes Cure. And like I mentioned, in clinical trials, all 329 of the individuals who used this method were completely free of their herpes within 3 weeks. Since then, the Herpes Cure has helped 31,643 additional people across the world to destroy the herpes virus from their body. People like Cynthia Hamsworth of New Orleans, Louisiana, who recently wrote to say, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't even describe the feeling of relief I experienced when my doctor told me that the herpes virus had been completely eliminated from my body. Or when I realized that I would never have to worry about another humiliating outbreak again. I'm forever in your debt." Cynthia Hamsworth, New Orleans. And Natalie Richmond of Vilburg, California, who says, "This program needs to be broadcasted to every single American. Keeping it from them is unacceptable. It would be like curing cancer and then not telling the world about it. Not only did I remove all traces of the herpes virus using your program, I did it in 17 days. Please tell me what I can do to help get the word out." Natalie Richmond, Vilburg. The Herpes Cure program is only available via this website that you're on right now, and here's exactly what's included. The Herpes Cure is the result of a year of medical research, testing, and analysis. The program is broken up into 2 parts. In Part 1, you're given a list of the vitamins, supplements, and organic compounds required to uncloak the herpes virus. You probably won't have heard of a lot of these compounds and vitamins before, but they can all be found at your local grocery store or health food store and cost about $50 total. You're also given the specific quantities, time, and durations for taking each of the items listed. Some of them you take for all 3 weeks. Some of them you only take for the first week. So it's important that you do follow the schedule we've laid out. Part 1 lasts for 10 days, and by the end of it, you will have created the internal reaction needed to unbind the herpes virus from your cells, thus allowing your immune system to begin its attack. That brings us to Part 2 of the program. In this second phase, you're given a second group of vitamins and supplements to work to supercharge your immune system. Again, all of these vitamins and supplements can be found in your local grocery store or health food store and cost about $50 total. And just like in Part 1, you're being given a special schedule to follow, where we will tell you in the easy-to-understand steps what, when, and how you need to be taking your natural treatment protocol every day. Part 2 lasts between 11 and 13 days, and what's cool is that it's actually the easiest part. Think about herpes like a rat in your house or apartment that you're trying to catch. The hard part is getting it to come out from hiding and to walk into your trap. Once you do that, disposing of the rat and getting it out of your house forever is extremely easy. It's the same thing here. In Part 1, you get your herpes out of the hiding, and in Part 2, you simply kill the virus and throw it out of your body forever. So given what's inside the Herpes Cure, it should be pretty easy to see that there's nothing like this in the world, and that as long as Big Pharma remains a $300 billion per year industry, tragically, there never will be. And that's why it is so important to me that I share Dr. Reagan's and my program with as many people as possible. This is your one and only chance to completely and permanently eliminate the herpes simplex virus from your body. It's already worked for more than 32,000 people. It's completely natural, completely side effect free, and will cost you a total of $100 max to use. Even more crucially, it will get you your life back, so that you never need to feel embarrassed, humiliated, or ashamed again. There are other medications out there, of course, but none of them actually destroys herpes. They just suppress it. Taking Valtrex or any similar drug is a lot like taking aspirin for a fever. In both cases, it may temporarily alleviate the symptoms, but they aren't actually what kills the virus. Only our immune system can do that, which is why the herpes cure is so incredibly powerful. Plus, just like aspirin, taking medications for your herpes has serious and potentially devastating long-term side effects. Do you want to always feel nauseated or be balding by the time you're in your early 30s? Or need a kidney transplant when you reach 50? Of course not. And yet if you continue down the path you're on, that's exactly where those medications will leave you. And given all of the above